I've noticed for about a couple of months now, the slight shift in the state of the real estate market. And lately, I've noticed a various amounts of articles popping up over the place, all over the place, and videos as well popping up about the brutal buyer's market that's going on right now and the shift that's happening in some of the largest markets, if not majority all the markets in the United States. So, this is a very interesting topic. And what I like to do is put a little insight on what's going on. I want to speak to the people who are not 100% aware of what the buyer's market actually is and what a seller's market is and the difference and why the market shifts and changes and things like that. And by the end of the video, I hope that we all have a little better understanding of what these variations of the markets, the ups and the downs, the twists and the turns, what they mean to homeowners and specifically landlords, people looking to purchase property, and also people who are looking to sell property. And then I'll also share um, my thoughts on some of the strategies that's being utilized by savvy investors to help specific homeowners be able to capitalize regardless of what the market is. So, the first thing I want to do is just speak about what exactly is a buyer's market and some of the signs that we're seeing. And also, when you're riding around your neighborhood or you're just out and about, going to work, coming home, or whatever it is that you may do, take take a look at some of these things that I'm going to be noting here of the signs of the buyer market, and just take note of if you're seeing these things in your neighborhood or in your area, and this is how you'll be able to tell if how impacted your market is right now. So first things first, a buyer's market. The buyer's market, and if you can see the headline here, the buyer's market means that the housing market currently has shifted into the favor of buyers. So, right now, if you're looking to purchase property, the market is in favor of you. And one way we can tell that is a buyer's market versus a seller's market is right here. The U.S. housing market has entered a buyer's market phase with nearly 500,000 more sellers than buyers currently active in the market. And the caveat to this, which I thought was very interesting, was this is the largest imbalance on record. Like, really? Like, I've experienced now. I've been investing since 2014. That's when I first started getting my feet wet. I really got really active in 2016. So I've seen the shift in markets through the years, and just being a newer investor, when those first few shifts hit, it really rocked my business because I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what to do. Like, how does this uh, change the properties I'm purchasing and things like that. But this little caveat right here was interesting to me. This is the largest imbalance on record. I was just like, wow, like this is really interesting. This is something that we really, really have to pay attention to because if you know, and if you've been keeping up with the market over the years, as I have, you know that this just comes with the territory and this is just things that it just happens, but it's now I'm thinking like, okay, this is the largest imbalance on record. Well, why is that? That's a deeper question that I want to look into, and I hope that right there is something that we really need to keep an eye on because That's going to dictate not only how long we'll be in this market, but also how bad it can get, what the future looks like, what housing transforms into. Rentals, like is the rental prices, just everything that's going on in the real estate housing market. This is one of the biggest imbalances ever on record. So we know something huge is coming. Now, like I said, I've been watching the trends, but it's hard to not only think about, you know, predict where we're going, but even more importantly, how long it will be like this. So just to take a step back, just what they emphasized here, a buyer's market is when there's more inventory available than there are buyers available to purchase them. So majority of the housing market is really composed of a percentage of the big players. So a lot of the big players own majority of the real estate, and then you have a large portion where the general public own properties as well. But in instances like this, those big A player buyers who's purchasing a lot of properties, this is where they get very particular. They get very laxy daisy. They know that, they get their pick of the litter, they get the cream of the crop, they get the diamond in the rough. And they're very hesitant about what properties they purchase. And then the everyday person who wants to purchase, they're not available to do that. And we're going to get into why that is when we talk about why this is all happening. We'll get to that in a little bit. But just staying on the signs of a buyer market, the inventory is much more. It's much more It's pretty much like supply and demand. It's much more inventory available than there are people wanting to actively purchase these properties. Okay. So some of the signs and some of the things you're going to want to look out for when you're riding around your communities, your neighborhoods, your city, your state, and the country as a whole. Look and see how many for sale by owner signs are popping up. That's a big indicator that is now a buyer's market. How many properties are hitting the market? Also, if you look online or if you have access to the MLS or to sites like this, look at how many days on market, the DOM of how long properties are sitting before they sell. Because traditional properties that have been either built brand new or fixed up and are nice and beautiful, those are going to be some of the properties that's going to kind of go first. Those are going to be like kind of the top of the food chain. When new homeowners, married couples, or newly college graduates and things like that, they want to buy their first property, they want to buy their first home for their family. These are the people that's going to be getting the loans and going to be getting qualified and pre-qualified to purchase those type of properties. So those properties are going to be the first to go. And those are going to be the type of buyers that are looking for those properties. But those margins are very slim. And one of the reasons is because the state of the financial industry currently. And we'll get into that in a little bit. So just thinking about this buyer's market and all of those things, investors, homeowners, renters, landlords, everybody involved, which in actuality we're all involved in real estate in some way, shape, fashion, or form. But this creates situations where we have to get more strategic and make smart and strategic moves But this is also a time where a lot of people just opt out of the real estate game in the market altogether. They just throw their hands up, and they just say, I'm out. So we're going to get into later some of the strategies and some of the things that you can do if you don't just want to be pushed out of the housing market. And we can, discuss some of that stuff as well. So moving towards why this shift is happening and why the shift is happening now. So what's actually driving this shift? Now this is a mixture of things. But one of the focal points that I was able to, pinpoint, that I was able to see early on, I want to say maybe 6 months ago or a little earlier than that, was the interest rates and the mortgage rates and the HELOC rates and just all of these loans and all of this money and all of these financial resources that we are able to tap into as Americans, as US citizens. Now, if all of those rates are going up, a lot of people don't have access to the money as quickly as they did when it was a seller's market. So that's one of the biggest reasons why the shift happens. And then you also have just economic certainty, with things like the presidential election and just things with the economy and inflation. And if you guys have been noticing, just things with just businesses in general. I mean, so many businesses, big chains are cutting back, closing thousands and thousands of locations, or just going out of business altogether. I was just reading an article about one of the big automobile chains, retailers closing their doors. And, you have lots of restaurants, just like I think it was Red Lobster. They're closing like 2,000 restaurants in the US. So things like this is it pushes the economy to shift and have to autocorrect. And things have been changing for a while now. Like we kind of could see the writing on the wall. With the economy. Like I said, 6 months ago, maybe a little bit before that, I could kind of tell like, okay, some things is going on, but you can kind of see the writing on the wall. So we've been anticipating this in some way, shape, fashion, or form for quite some time now. I just believe that a lot of people, as myself, we just didn't know when. And I do think they've been talking about this for a while now. In fact, I personally thought that this would happen a little bit sooner than it did, but I think it just needed to take a little extra push, like to tip the iceberg and kind of, push things over. But why not now? Why not 2025? So I'm not surprised. Now, moving into, what does this mean for homeowners? What does this mean if you're someone who owns a property? Maybe you have a rental, maybe you inherited a property, or maybe you are, just a landlord, or you just maybe you just have a house that you just you're thinking about selling, and you're just like, well, is this the right time to sell? Should I hold out? What I would say is, just everybody's situation is different. And, just thinking back to the seller's market, how things were, you know, it was a chart topping time for homeowners because the inventory was low and there was an abundance of buyers. So what happens during that market, in the seller's market, you have bidding wars. And you have a lot of people who are, bidding on a property, and they're, raking the price up. So the seller may have asked, the homeowner may have asked for, let's say, 100,000, and after 4, 5, 6 people come in and put offers in, by the time that a homeowner sells, Well, hey, that price may be up to 150. And this is what we were seeing in the seller's market. And if you are thinking about selling that property, you may be thinking like, oh, well, maybe I'll just hold out until then. And I will say, go with the situation that fits you and your family best. Because there is ways for you to still get the best out of your property. You just have to, come up with a different strategy. And we're going to talk about that later about the strategy. But, you may be thinking like, do I just need to hold out to whenever this market shifts? And honestly, the last buyer's market we were in, I would say was back in, I would say around 20, anytime before, mm, I would say before, I would say around 2018. I think we were still pretty much in a buyer's market. And that's from the market crash of 2008. So that was 10 years that we were in a pretty solid buyer's market. It was a pretty good balance in 2018, and then 2019 very similar, and then I think like around 2020 is when the market kind of went crazy, but you would think it would have tanked in 2020, but actually, that's when some of those bidding wars were at its best. But the point I'm trying to make is we don't know how long we're going to be in this buyer's market. So if you're looking to sell your property and your first thoughts are, well, I'm just going to hold out to the seller's market. I mean, if you can do that, great. I don't know if I would advise that. If it was me personally, I wouldn't do that, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because depending on your situation, every day that you hold that property, I don't know if your property's vacant, occupied, if it's a rental that you just maybe like, oh, I think I want to sell. The tenants this, the tenants is that. I'm getting older. Maybe you may be sick, or it's a plethora of situations that people are in who are thinking about selling, and some are favorable and some are not. So if you're in a favorable situation where you are okay and you're like, okay, I can hold this on, go ahead and hold on. But just remember, every day that you keep that property costs money unless you're cash flowing at a very high ROI. And then there's still an uncertainty of how long that's going to last with some of the changes in the shift. So it just all depends on your situation. But like I said, if your property is making money, then I would personally, if it was me, I may hold out till the market shifts a bit. But if you're a person that your property's not, and you're every day you keep that property, every month, money is coming out of your pockets and cost is coming out of your bank account, and your income is being threatened, or you're trying to figure out, what I'm going to do, and that's one of the biggest reasons and one of the focal points of why you're thinking about selling anyway in this market. If it was me, I personally wouldn't hold out in hopes that the market is going to readjust quickly. And the reason I say that is because this shift has been in the making for years now. Like, if you were reading articles a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, all the information was saying, it was just anticipation. When is this going to happen? When is the correction going to come? Because things were out of hand. Because in these market turns that we're talking about, it's these big swings that happen sometimes. And sometimes, in a buyer market, everything could just tank and everything could just go down and go downhill. And then in the seller's market, sometimes, just like we just experienced last couple of years, all these bidding wars and just, properties were being purchased for much more than what they were valued to be. And that hurts the market as well. So there are pros and cons in both markets, especially specifically when there's these just drastic swings. And this is why the market has to balance itself out. And that's what we kind of all want. We want a balanced market. But things like, 500,000 more sellers than buyers currently, and those huge imbalances is what, it hurts the economy. So let's just get into this article a little bit and just see some of the things that they're saying. And I haven't read this yet. I read one similar to it, and then I found this one, and I was like, this would be perfect to talk about in a video, because I think a lot of people can get value from what's going on, and also I know a lot of people who are just like, what's going on with the housing market. The housing market is always a hot topic because we're all in real estate. So according to recent data from Redfin, there are approximately 1.9 million home sellers in the U.S. housing market compared to just 1.5 million buyers, creating a 33.7% surplus of sellers. This represents the most significant imbalance in records dating back to 2013. And 2013 was, what was that, 6 years after 2008? Or was it 5 years? Yeah, 5 years since 2008. And we were still, in a huge imbalance. So that just goes to show how long these these market shifts could take. It actually got worse. After 5 years, it was still bad. It was worse. Well, I don't want to use the term worse because a lot of things happened in 2008. A lot of people got in trouble. A lot of people, 2008 was bad. And I didn't know much about the market at the time, but just based off of all the things I read and what I heard, it seems as bad as it can get. But the shift is expected to drive home prices down by approximately 1% by the end of the year as sellers compete for a diminishing pool of buyers, giving purchasers increased negotiating powers. And that's something that I wanted to touch on here. Just what this means for homeowners. So, a few things to keep an eye on is, you may be thinking, is my home suddenly worth less now? Does my price, my home, you know, worth, is my appraisal going to tank? Is my equity going to disappear? Now, not necessarily. You see, they're saying it's only at 1% right now, and we're at the tail beginning of this shift. It just means that you need to be more aware of what's happening and be ready to pivot if you are thinking about selling, and also knowing your numbers, evaluating your property, evaluating the market, knowing your buyers, knowing your options. You just want to do a little bit more homework before you just go blindly list your property. That's what it means for homeowners who are looking to sell in this market. Now, it may take longer to sell, and the buyers will definitely come in negotiating, because what this means in a lot of ways is, buyers are just going to be wanting to, they're going to realize they kind of have the upper hand, and they're going to also realize that the pressure is now on the sellers. So they're going to definitely come in with negotiating. So you can almost guess that if you list that property for the same example we used earlier, for that same 100,000 right now, instead of it being four, five, six buyers bidding and raising up a bidding war, it actually will be maybe one buyer or two buyers that come in and they may say, "Oh, you want 100K? Yeah, I'll give you 80. Can you do 75?" So keep that in mind when you do decide if you want to sell in this market. And then you also have, may want to be a little flexible on the price, or you may have to offer some perks as far as, contingencies or selling. And it's a lot of different things that you can offer to make the deal work. If you do have a buyer that comes in and you guys fall on a number that you are comfortable with, there may be some other perks that you may want to add in there. Like maybe if the property's furnished, maybe they can keep the furniture. Maybe if it's appliances there, they can have the appliances and come with the property. Just things like that. And there's other things too, that we can get into at another time that you can do to kind of perk up the deal a little bit. Now, now the good news is, in every market, there's always options. If you're thinking of selling, renting, or if you decide just to hold, or whatever it is you're thinking about doing, it's more so about knowing how to play the game with the market and staying competitive and creative and strategic in any market. That's how you win at this game that I've learned. So just be sure to stay realistic. If you are going to list, just stay realistic on your pricing. There's no more, oh, my neighbor sold for 300,000. I'm going to list for 300,000. Well, your neighbor's house was 500 more square feet bigger than yours. You have a 2-car garage. She got a 3. Your property hasn't been rehabbed or updated or renovated in 5 to 6 years. Everything in her property was brand new. Okay. And just because she got 300, you're not getting 300. Especially in this market, you're not getting close to that. So just being realistic. Don't think, no one's desperate now. A lot of those buyers that were uneducated, uninformed, and just had that money that all that money that everyone was getting from the bank very easily, even the interest rates and everything was down. That's out the window. So you have to be realistic, and then you also have to be creative because it is very competitive market for sellers. You're in competition now with every other person that wants to sell, and now it's flipped. Instead of buyers being in competition with each other, sellers are in competition with each other. And that's just how it works. Now, big picture, and where we're heading here in these next, I don't know, like I said, I don't know how long this is going to last. Could be a couple years, could be a decade. So, just keep that in mind. But because the great thing is it doesn't last forever, so it is temporary. It's just a cooling off period. And, it could be a start of a longer trend. We just don't know. That's the $1 million question. Now, just make sure you're staying informed, and you are understanding how to present your property. If you're going to sell, present your property in a light where you're going to highlight your property's features. You're going to do some great things to make your property stand out from the rest. There's a ton of things that you can do. I don't want to get into it in this video because I don't want this video to be is already we're getting pretty long. But I'll be sure to put out more content regarding things that you can do to raise your percentage. If they're saying the prices are down by 1%, there's ways we can up that percentage point by just simple hacks that you can do with your property without having to renovate it, because obviously if money's tight right now, and you think putting 5, 10, 15, 20K into your property is you're going to get that, that 20K is going to turn to 50 and you're going to get that back. Well, no, you got another thing coming. And honestly, to be honest with you, the average homeowner, they put they'll put that 20K into their property, and then they'll put the 20K on the wrong places. So they think that 20K is going to, yield them a return. In actuality, it yields them nothing but a 20K loss, because the average homeowner doesn't know where to even put that money. I'll make another video about knowing exactly where to put that money. In fact, I have a guide that I created. I just thought about it. I have a new guide that I created. I'll link the link in the description sometime soon. So if you're one of the earlier viewers of this video, it may not be there. Bear with me, but just save, like, and make sure you subscribe too, because I'll link that in the description. And then in that guide, I detail specifically ways that you can enhance your property without spending money. And then also, if you're going to spend money, I have included in there exactly where to put that money, so that you can actually yield a return and not just have another 20K loss, because you want to keep that money in your pocket. You don't want to put that money into your property at all. And I would go against, if it was me, I personally would go against any renovations if you're looking to sell, because you would be surprised how many homeowners I speak with that are working. They have projects, and I have the emphasis here, they have projects they're working on their house, and then once they finish their project, then they're sell, and they have these hopes of, generating this income, or, not income, just generating a return on that money, and it just never happens. In fact, a lot of times the contractors screw them over. They actually take a loss, and they end up losing even more on their property than they would have if they would have just, tried a couple of simple strategies. So I'll do that for you guys. I'll make sure I link that in there, to save you headache, heartache, and more importantly, well, I'm not gonna say more importantly, but just as importantly, your money. Keep that money in your pocket. So yeah, it's gonna be very important to just stay informed and stay involved and continue to educate yourself and know what's going on in the market. And that's one of your biggest advantages right now. Just being able to adapt to whatever's going on. And this is something that I continuously to make sure that I do when it comes to my business and how I operate. And I would tell anyone who's, you know, uh, in the real estate space looking to sell or purchase or whatever, I would tell them the same thing. Like, just knowing what's going on, that is huge. And you can just, be fluid with the market and not let this market, the worst thing to do is let this market just push you over and push you out. And that's just what happens to a lot of people looking to buy and sell in this market. If you look here back to the article, despite the median home sale price growing at its slowest pace in nearly 2 years, then that's 1.6% year over year to 431,931 dollars in April. Monthly housing payments hit record highs as mortgage rates hover around 6.73%. Just think about that. 7% for mortgage rates right now. They were just like 2% a couple years ago. Like, even like I think 1.7%. I've seen some crazy rates. So you guys, you see exactly what's going on now. Now, to keep going, economic uncertainty, including tariff concerns and layoffs, has further dampened home buyers' enthusiasm. So this is another reason why this is all happening, you all. It's just too much uncertainty with the economy. It's, you got the tariff stuff going on, and then yes, just the layoffs, with so many businesses closing, downsizing, and pulling back. A lot of buyers don't want to get themselves into these mortgages where they just don't know what the future holds. that a recent Redfin survey found that nearly 1 in 4 Americans canceled plans for major purchases due to the tariff worries. And Redfin senior economist Assad Kane said many sellers haven't yet adjusted to the reality of the new market. And like I said, just being in know, you know, be informed and adapt. Don't be like the average seller and just not wanting to accept reality. The balance of power in the U.S. housing market has shifted toward buyers, but a lot of sellers have yet to see or accept the writing on the wall, Mr. Kane said. So, this is what it is inevitable. I'm not going to read this entire article, but I will link it in the description as well. If you would like to read the entire article, I would suggest you do, and similar articles to it, because I think, just having that information and staying in the know is going to help you in this market if you're in the real estate space. So I did tell you guys I wanted to talk about just a strategy that I use ever since 2020. Now, back in 2020 is when I seen one of my first major shifts in the market as a new investor and a new homeowner and a new seller and a new buyer. And there were so many different things going on that if I didn't adapt or adjust, it would have, you know, it would have been detrimental. And I was able to get creative. And what I was able to do is a property that I had at the time, I was looking to sell it and I was getting cash offers for 15,000, 18,000. Now this was a property in Birmingham, Alabama, and it needed work. It needed a lot of work. It needed renovations. At the time, I didn't know what I wanted to do with the property. My first thought was I was going to Airbnb it. Airbnb was very hot at the time. But when I just went back to the renovation cost and everything that I would have needed to do to get it up to speed, I wasn't confident in that strategy because of its area, the area that the property was in. I just really wasn't that familiar with it. I'm not from that place. I just ended up purchasing that property because I got a really good deal on it a little while earlier. And then at this time, the market is changing. I'm like, what do I do with this property? I was going to Airbnb it. When I started running the numbers, started talking to contractors, having people come over, I was just like, for what it's going to cost me and everything that I'm going to have to do to get it up to speed and to run this property that's out here where I don't live in an area that's kind of like not where when people come into the town and they want to stay in Airbnb, they probably not going to want to stay in this house. So I initially was looking to get cash offers. And like I mentioned, I was getting 15,000, 18,000. Oh, my highest cash offer, I don't remember it being much more than that, maybe 22,000. And I just knew that wasn't going to work for me. And what ended up happening was I ended up doing my first seller finance transaction, and I was able to find a buyer who purchased that property from me on a note as is. So I didn't do any work, I didn't make any repairs, I didn't do anything like that. Would you guys believe I was able to sell that same property that I was getting those low ball offers on? I ended up selling that property for, I think the exact figure was like 56 or 57,000 on terms. The terms was I carried a note for 60 months, so 5 years. Now the property is paid off. I no longer own it. I was able to help a young family become first time homeowners, and they just so happen to know how to do work. They weren't afraid of work, and they purchased the property as is. They did all the renovations. I didn't do anything. And what a blessing that was to learn that so early on in my career. It's been a game changer for me. Now I help other homeowners in similar situations who wants to sell their property, but the cash offer just isn't going to cut it. I help them structure these type of transactions for their property. So that's what I was able to do. And like I mentioned earlier, you may have to get a little creative. You may have to try some things out. There's a plethora of different strategies similar that you can use that may not look like that, but may be similar. So if you're interested in learning more about how to get a little creative in this market, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Tap in with me. I'm going to be dropping a lot of information on what I do to keep my business afloat through any market, because with these strategies that I utilize now, it doesn't matter if it's a seller's market, it doesn't matter if it's a buyer's market. My business continuously runs. It doesn't stop a beat. My buyer pool actually opens up in markets like this. So it's been great for me, great game changer, and I'm more than happy to share some of that information with you all. If you would like a complimentary property evaluation, go ahead and hit the link in the description and set up some time to get on one of either myself or one of my colleagues' calendars, someone in our company. Go ahead and do that, and let's see if we can possibly help you out. If you're thinking about selling, you just don't know what you should do, we can help you out, give you some tips on how to get your property in the best shape before you list it. If you're thinking about listing with a realtor, some things that you can do to get your property to position your property in a way that's going to give it the best chance to sell quickly as possible, for as much as you can. Okay, don't just blindly, I speak to someone every other day who just threw their property up on the MLS for sale with the realtor, and the realtor's going to take it because it's a listing. It's a listing, and they priced it wrong. They staged it wrong, or they didn't stage it at all. The property might have been a mess. Your property might be ugly. Your property may have tenants. You may have all of these different situations, and you just don't know what to do. And if you do it wrong, it can literally cost you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. I see it every single day. So if you want a little help with that, continue to watch this channel, because that's what we talk about here. And if you are more of like, okay, I need more than that. I need hands on, I need details, I need steps. I need you to hold my hand and put my property in your arms like a baby and rock my baby to sleep to get it to where we like to go. Then go ahead. We're offering complimentary evaluation. So go ahead and do that. But that's all I have for this video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about this shift. Let me know what you think about this economy, and where do you think it's going? Do you think this is going to be something that we're going to be able to breeze by in a year and be like, okay, woof, we weathered the storm? Or is this going to be something that is going to top 2008? Currently, I don't know. I'm trying to engulf myself in as much information as knowledge, and picking brains of people who've seen these shifts for more of a long period of time than I have. See what they got to say, and nobody knows. No one's ever able to predict these things perfectly, but it's nice to be able to experience it and gain the knowledge of experiencing it. So that's all I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching it, tapping in with me. I hope you got some value out of it. I hope it brought some value to you. And if there's someone that you know who you think would also get value from this video, make sure you send it to them. And that's all I have for you guys. I'll talk to you on the next one. Peace.